Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for our next speaker. Super excited to have Mish here. She is an entrepreneur, has worked as an AI senior product manager, and she has a master's of art in communications and technology from the University of Alberta. Mish's session is about getting unstuck through a product journey, which I think is something that could be super valuable for not only just here in our hackathon, but every day through your life or through your work or school. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Mish. So welcome, Mish.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully you can see it.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yes. So, welcome to the Unstuck in 15 session. This is a decision-making framework that can help you navigate your way through product commercialization. Julia already introduced me, but I'm an entrepreneur now, creator of the framework. I also create online courses. I'm working on one for Udemy, bringing AI products to market without blowing your budget. And then I'm also learning to draw. So you'll see my illustrations throughout my presentation. I haven't drawn everything in here, but anyway. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll go over why learn to get unstuck, getting stuck through the product journey, which is completely normal. It'll happen all the time. And then how you can get yourself unstuck. And when you build product, you come across different frameworks and tools like the business model canvas, or you've had a session on design thinking. There's also agile software development, and this can be seen as a tool in your toolbox. So I know, some people can be really dogmatic with using the tools and frameworks, but I really encourage people to take what they can from each, kind of use what works for you. And really these frameworks are a way to see your product through a certain lens to help you advance and move forward, and also to help give you a common language with your team to bring about alignment. And so, the purpose of being able to get unstuck is to create possibility. So throughout your entire product journey, you constantly want to be experimenting. And I can't emphasize that enough. And even still, I still forget, and I still come up with a solution idea I'm really excited about and will run forward with it. But if you can pause and tap into divergent thinking and experiment and test things, then you can find that path where you can provide maximum value. So getting stuck is part of the journey, mostly because you're dealing with so many unknowns. There are unknowns in the customer desirability space. So when you first are building products, you want to hone in on your niche, but finding the niche customer who falls in love with your solution is a process. It's an iterative process. They may say that the problem that you're trying to solve for them is a very important problem with a very high pain point. But some unknowns are, where does that rank in priority? So they could agree that it's painful, but if it's not in the top, 1, 2, or 3 in priority, they may not use their solution, even if it's brilliant. And then there are tons of unknowns with business viability, with your go-to-market strategy. You can get stuck on how to price your product or what business model to use. With technical feasibility, there's tons of ways to get stuck, which I'm sure you've found through this hackathon. You can get stuck on, does this solution solve the problem in a way that is useful and monetizable? And then also get stuck on how to prioritize your features. And then with AI products in particular, there are more ways to get stuck. So just figuring out what's possible. Your problem definition can evolve as you go on your journey. Understanding when AI is needed, and just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So throughout the rest of the presentation, I'm going to refer to my last project I was on to use as an example. So I worked on, this is like my favorite project. I just love this so much. It used computer vision to detect if a cat was happy or not. So I'll be referencing this as we move forward. The Unstuck in 15 framework, the reason it works is because of the constraints. So you have the constraints of needing to get unstuck in 15 minutes. For whatever reason, if you go over the 15 minutes, I mean, you can ask questions till the end of time and be stuck, indefinitely. Also, being constrained to 3 questions forces you to ask high caliber questions. So when you do an Unstuck in 15 session, whether it's on yourself or with a teammate where you have somebody asking the questions and using the framework and the person who's stuck, if you burn a question, then that's it. Then you have one fewer question. So the goal is to ask that really high caliber question to not necessarily make the decision for you, but to which you could end up with your decision made, but to get you to the next phase. And the beauty of it is you don't have to know the answers. You just have to know how to ask the right questions. And so with the framework, there are 3 ways that people get stuck. You can get stuck by trying to force an outcome. So for example, when you're building a product and you're trying to get users to come back to the app, you can be so single-mindedly focused on trying to get customers or users back to the app. And that's one way you can get stuck. Or with how to convince users to be okay with 60% accuracy might be a way you can get stuck with an AI product. You can get stuck by thinking in binary terms. So, option A or option B. So with the cat app, are customers cat owners or are they veterinarians? Do we spend time and money on gathering more data, or do we spend our resources on marketing? And then the third way that you can get stuck is by having too many options. And this can happen with things like marketing. Like, should you go B2B, direct to consumer? If you go direct to consumer, what marketing channels, social media, Facebook or Instagram ads, Google ads, or events. You can have too many options with too many niche use cases for your ML model. And so when you find that you're stuck and you find which pathway or how you're stuck, you'll want to then look at categories of questions. There's 5 categories. And so you'll choose from those categories to help you get unstuck. So with the first 2 buckets of choosing, like trying to force an outcome or thinking in binary, option A or option B, oftentimes the best first question question category to think about is widening the lens. So, for example, with how to get users to come back to the app, you can widen the lens by asking, what are all of the ways to provide value to your users? And by the way, feel free to put questions in the chat, and then, as they come up, and we can go through them at the end. And then another, with the example of how to convince users to be okay with 60% prediction accuracy, you can widen the lens by asking a question like, what are all of the ways knowing 60% can provide value? And that's a way you can get unstuck. The second category has to do with being stuck because you don't have enough information about the options in front of you. So with the example of, do we spend more time and money on gathering more data, or do we spend our resources on marketing? You could ask a question like, what are all of the questions we should consider that will help us make the best quick decision? And each category, it's kind of like a guide to think about how to ask the questions, but the questions will be unique to the circumstances. The third category of questions is around risk. So you may know all of the options, you may know the details of all of the options, but for example, with, do we spend more time and money on gathering more data, or do we spend our resources on marketing? You could ask a question like, what are all of the risks of all of the options? Because sometimes we get stuck because we aren't conscious of what the risks are. So just asking the question, a lot of times you'll come up with your own risk mitigation strategies, and that can help you get unstuck. And then the fourth category is around external factors. And this typically has to do with people. So we can get stuck, we can know the right path, but then there might be external pressure from investors, from executives, from advisors. And so it's good to listen to people, especially if they have authority in the area that you're trying to navigate. But at the end of the day, you're the one that has the nuance and the detailed information about your project. So you could ask questions with category 4 with external factors by saying, like, what are all of the things getting in the way of doing what you know you need to do? And then once you identify the people, then you can go back to some of the other categories of questions to continue getting unstuck. And then one more example with external factors. And this is something that's common if you work in an organization building artificial intelligence products, is business stakeholders and investors, their goal is to return money to investors. So sometimes you'll get external pressure on a certain business, or sorry, a certain machine learning model because they see the business opportunity. But from your perspective, there might be too many niche cases for one model, and so it's hard to commercialize. And then the fifth category is around confidence. So sometimes you have everything you need, but it's your confidence that's getting in the way. So if you're the one asking the question of your partner and you can tell that they're not moving forward because they're just lacking confidence and they've overthought it, so they don't need any more details, you can ask them, what are all of the ways you can have confidence moving forward? And I really love this question. And I love this process in general, because by asking people questions, they have to think of their own answers. And so they're thinking deeply about this, and it's more likely to resonate and be effective. And then I'll just, I think, spend like 5 more minutes and going through how do you apply this framework. So when you're doing a session, either on yourself or with a partner, again, you don't want to burn your questions. So you don't want to ask, how are you stuck? You want to phrase it as a statement. Tell me how you're stuck. So what's nice about this is as they tell you how they're stuck, they may come up with multiple, but you have them choose one specific question. So it's a great way. This method is a great way to break down big problems into easier to solve decisions. And so once they give you their response, then you want to mirror back, repeat what you heard them say. And sometimes they'll clarify if you've misunderstood something, or they'll give you additional detail. So mirroring is a technique that's used in negotiations, and it's highly effective. And then once you've heard from them how they're stuck, you want to identify which bucket they belong in. And then that'll help you understand what category of question to ask. And, I was going to think of an example. I wonder, well, okay, I just have a couple more slides and then we'll see how we are on time. So then you'll choose from your buckets. So like I said, if you're stuck on, bucket 1 or bucket 2, so trying to force an outcome or thinking in a binary term, then oftentimes the first category, widening the lens, is a question that'll be helpful in moving forward. And then when you hear the response, you want to mirror back again, and also think about what other categories of questions you could use to help them move to the next step. So a lot of times with the second bucket of choosing between A and B, the first question might be widening the lens, but then the second question could be around getting more data because they don't have enough information about all of their options. And then, sorry, I think I had like an example, but it didn't show up in my notes. So, but you'll cycle through each of the questions. And the third question is the one that tends to be the magic bullet, but it's also the hardest question to come up with. So this one, I find the best way to approach it is to just pause. If you just pause and the question will kind of come up for you to ask, and that can help help your partner get unstuck. And yeah, so with applying a decision-making framework through your product commercialization journey, there's just going to be so many ways that you get stuck. You'll get stuck on who to serve, where to find them, on how to deliver them value, how to get compensated for the value you create. So this is just kind of that Swiss Army knife multi-tool that you can use. And I just want to thank you for having me. And because you've invited me here, I'm offering 20% off my Unstuck in 15 sessions. So normally they're $75, but you can get them for $60. So if you compare it to executive coaching is like $350 to $500 an hour. And I'm on a mission to make executive coaching accessible to everyone, because I don't think it should just be executives that get that type of knowledge. See, how are we? I forgot to start the clock, so I don't know how we are on time. Oh, okay. So we don't have time to do an unstuck session, but we do have time to answer questions. And I see, Francie, do you have a question?
So like, how do you generalize this for like personal decision versus professional decisions? Like I'm trying to figure out that part. Like I understand these questions are like very generic, but like you talked about, like, you know, whether we have to like one of the questions that you tried to answer was like whether we have to leave a husband or not.
Oh.
Like these are like more sensitive than like selecting a job profession. It is going to affect family and things like that, right? Like, you know, when you have kids and things. So yeah. How, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that has been really interesting in my calls. Even the professional questions, a lot of times underneath it is something deeply personal. So they may feel like it's a tactical business decision or something like that, but it could be something that's deeply rooted. So that's where, I mean, in this application, we're talking about applying it to, you know, commercializing your product. And so a lot of times it can be not as personal, but for sure it can get deeply personal. So if you want to try this method, it's probably a good idea to try it on somebody you trust and you have that kind of mutual trust. But I think this is also a way to build trust as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, that answered it, Mish. Thank you. So everybody has the ability to now ask question directly by voice or by video. You can come on video and talk as well.
Yeah, I'm like really curious what everybody thinks. Yes, Julia?
I was going to say, we've had a chance to chat with some of the participants, and some of them are feeling a bit stuck on maybe different options. There's a ton of different ways where they could go and take their solutions that they're creating. I mean, this session has been super helpful. Any anything that they should like really focus on within like the next, because they'll be presenting tomorrow afternoon. Any important questions maybe they should think of even today in their process where they're kind of deciding like where they should be heading, like which solution they should be focusing on?
Yeah, for sure. So when you have a question like that, the entry point to me that comes to mind is having too many options. So then when you have too many options and you look at your categories, one of the categories you can explore is around risk. So you can look at what are all of the risks of all of the options. So you can kind of lay out the options in front of you and then talk through each one and talk through the risk. And maybe the risk is time to market, maybe which, impacts opportunity costs. Maybe the risk is regulatory. So if you're building a healthcare app, that might help you eliminate that because you don't have experience on your team to navigate healthcare regulation, things like that. So I think the risk bucket is probably a good one to use in that scenario.
I have a question. You mentioned that sometimes the business stakeholders, their requirements are more emotional than business. How do you handle that? How do you steer them away back to business?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that it's emotional, but it's like bottom line driven. And the stakeholder communication is definitely a tricky one. I think, so say you're in an investor meeting and your investors are putting pressure on you to monetize quickly or give them a date from which to monetize. I guess you would need to do this on the fly. So they're not the one that's stuck. It's like you're the one that's stuck. So that's kind of, well, okay. So aside from the framework with how to get stakeholders on board, it's setting expectations in the beginning, and especially around how many unknowns. So when you are creating a zero start product where you have zero customers, zero product, like all of that, there are way more unknowns. It's not the same as if you were at Amazon and you were creating a new product under Amazon and you have all of that customer data and you know what the customer challenges are. So setting expectations with stakeholders, communicating openly along the way, letting them know that you've outlined your assumptions, you've outlined your the unknowns that you're aware of. And then when you meet the next time, you can show what progress you've made on your experimentation, what new, because you'll have unknown unknowns. So what new unknowns emerge and how you're going to tackle that. But if you set the tone that this is an iterative process and you're going to iterate your way to success and you want to have them on board on that journey. I would even go so far as to say, I wouldn't take on an investor who wasn't open to experimentation. Has anybody else stuck?
I might have a slightly different question. So let's say you have like so many things on the go, and you might want to choose what you want to go forward with and maybe like sacrifice something else. How do you deal with on those situations?
Yeah, so there I would think of the risk category. So what are all of the risks of all of the options? So if option is, there's a path A, path B, path C, path D, go through and assess the risk, and then you can start eliminating options that way. With prioritization, like you want to look at what is your next best step to advance you forward toward your goal. So that's another way of framing it where you can see what the next best step is for each of the options. So, sorry, I had a thought and then I lost it. anyway, so you'll want to work toward which of those. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're advancing toward your goal.
Thank you. That was great.
Any other questions for Mish?
Can I ask a question of you guys? So,
Yeah,
if nobody
definitely.
has any questions, I'm just curious, just from hearing this for the first time, if it's clear what the framework is and what kind of value that anybody's identified from having a framework like this, and what are the challenges in that you see?
I think it makes it clear, right? Like sometimes things are so vague to us. Like when we have a problem, it's so vague to us, we do not have access to something like this. We don't know exactly what we need to do, but having a kind of framework like this is like making it clear 1, 2, 3, right? So yeah, it helps in that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, with bringing clarity, that's a good way to phrase it and think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's parts of it that really stood out to me too, that I think is really important, and it really simple, but really important. Like the risks aspect, that's something that everyone kind of deals with no matter what, if it's something they're going through personally or professionally. I think it's great to think about that, because it brings it to something that's digestible and less overwhelming, which I think is really what we're trying to kind of get past when you're trying to get unstuck, how to get away from being overwhelmed. So that's what I took from it. I think it was great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, if there's no questions for Mish, thank you so much, Mish, for your time. Appreciate you taking us through this. And I hope everyone is able to take these nuggets that Mish has given us and apply it to the solutions that we're working on this weekend, and also just through their personal, professional life. And yeah, we have Mish's, I think, LinkedIn information on Discord. So feel free to connect with her. And again, thank you so much, Mish.
Yeah, thank you. And I can share the deck too with you if you'd like.
That would be great. We'll share with our participants in the Discord. So thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me.
Thanks, Mish.